Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, guys. Welcome to Fine Print. This is the weekly show on Sundays where we take a look at a poem that you have written and we just kind of dig in, we analyze it. It's not a critique session, it's more just trying to see what you got going on, what's happening with the speaker, what's happening with the structure, what's happening with the imagery, all the devices you're using, things like that. So that way we can just get a better understanding of what poetry is and get excited about things that you are doing in your own writing. To guide you in this journey, my name is Jeff, and today we have a great piece that I'm excited to dig into. This piece was sent to us by Freely Edie over on Threads. So if you're not on Threads, we strongly encourage you to check that out. We want to thank them again for letting us take a look at their work. As you can see here, it's in the form of a nonet, which is always a fun form. Nonet, basically, what you're doing is you're starting off with 9 syllables, then your second line is 8 syllables, then your next line is 7. You basically just keep going down to 1 syllable. So we're playing around with form. We're seeing how restrictions can actually open us up to lots of things, which is great. Before we dig into the poem, I just want to give some quick reminders because we have lots of things happening, lots of things coming up. It's going to be the end of the month, which means that we are soon closing for applications for our residency program. So, for instance, if you are a female poet, then we have an opportunity for you. We have the collective residency, which you can find at theversuspoetry.com. It's a 3-day residency. It's already paid for. You just need to submit. We're looking for 2 women identifying poets. We will host you in Columbus, Ohio, in a space. This is going to be through Friday, December 8th through Sunday, December 10th. So if you want to have a space to yourself and share with another poet, come on down. We'll give you a 20-minute featured reading that will be recorded. We'll send you the recording afterwards so you can do with it as you wish. And one poet who must be a poet of color will receive a $200 stipend. The other poet will just be able to share the space. Unfortunately, guys, this is I'm funding this, so I don't have like infinite things to go through. So we can't do a stipend for both right now. What if this goes well? Who knows what can happen in the future? If you go to versuspoetry.com/residency, you'll see the application. Basically, we're looking for 3 poems and a 1-paragraph description of a project you're working on. So send us that. And one final reminder before we jump into the poem 2. If you're trying to like schedule some events or create some poetry around your work, I'm gonna create some poetry around your poetry. If you're trying to create some video around your poetry, whether it's just you reading a poem, you have a workshop that you want to record, something like that, you want to host something online, but you don't know what to do, cool, we can help you with that. If you go to, we have a section called Stanza Studios. You can just say, click this button, let's talk your video or event. You can also see this green tab up here will do the same thing. So we can talk for free, just like a free like 15, 20-minute chat, see what you got going on, and see how we can help you. All right, that being said, I want to dig into the poem. I'm guessing you want to dig into the poem too. So let's take a look at the poem. We're going to start off just with a reading. This is again by Freely Edie. Currently doesn't have a title, at least not one that I know of. The basket reeks of rotting apples. Gladiolus slump in a vase. These rooms just like you left them. Cracked walls still stained with tar. Traps you set lurking. Soulless, absent. Silent storms still rage here. Give that up to Freely Edie for putting in the work and writing work. That's great. So the device I really want to kind of focus on for today as we read this poem is the concept of irony. And irony is all about, kind of unexpected surprises and twists where we take an expectation and then we subvert it. And I think that in this poem, there are several places where that sort of irony is occurring. I think the form is also a great device for this poem to make that happen. So, first of all, there's no title, but there is a nonet. And a nonet has to, just by its very nature, kind of has to involve a lot of movement just because you're constantly cutting the amount of room you have to work with. Again, 9 syllables, 8 syllables, 7 syllables, 6 syllables, just cut, 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 cut. So there's this constant sense of momentum that is building until you reach the final line, which again is 1 syllable, which is here. So you're going to end with a punch. It really sets itself up for that very, very nicely. And I think that works well for some of the concepts that the poem is going on, because this is a poem that has these contrasting senses of static, being firm, stuck, that are yet paired with these images of movement and energy and shifting. And those sorts of contrasts I find to be very, very ironic. Irony is a device that can really help you add a new layer of complexity to your work. So even a very simple idea suddenly can become a lot more complicated. If irony is still something that you're not entirely sure how to use or even what it may be, to give a quick example, I was I was trying to come up with the thumbnail for this stream today, and so I went to ChatGPT and I was just like, "Hey, like, what are some ideas that you have for conveying irony?" And one of the ways that they suggested was to have a person or an image of a person that walked past a banana peel, so walked past it without slipping. So that's something already you're kind of breaking from it, because you see the banana people like, oh, hi, he's going to slip on the banana peel. Surprise. But what ChatGPT added was they said, then have that person, or in the image, have them slip on a sign that cautions people slippery when wet. So instead of slipping on the banana peel, they slip on the sign that's warning them about the slip. So that's a quick example of some irony. So the first, I'm just going to kind of point out some things that struck me as ironic. We already kind of talked about the sense of kind of the contrast between motion versus static that is kind of occurring throughout the poem, is something I already find ironic. Further exemplified by the poem, it's a single poem, and yet it's a poem that is constantly being eaten away just by the nature of the form. The first line, the basket reeks of rotting apples. So you have this concept of, oh, it's look, it's a basket of apples. So you're playing with the concept of something being fresh, but instead, what do you get? No, these are apples that reek. What a strong active verb that is super negative, um, of rotting and decay. So the basket reeks of rotting apples. It's also a bit interesting too, because we don't even know actually if the apples are even still in the basket. You know, that the apples could have already been thrown away or something, but the basket still smells of them. So I kind of like some of that uncertainty in the first line. Gladiolus slump in a vase. So again, we're getting another image. We get the vase. We get these containers that can hold things that are so beautiful or things that are beneficial to us, and yet no, we're getting signs of decay. Gladiolus slump in a vase. So the first two lines are doing kind of similar things in that regard. Our next line, these rooms just like you left them. Okay, so we get something again static. These rooms just like you left them. We have this sense of abandonment, which again kind of comes across throughout. Rotting apples, abandoned, the gladiolus, the slumping in a vase, um, not being taken care of, or not really being helped. These rooms just like you left them. Cracked walls, still stained with tar. I think it's kind of this still, I think, is doing a lot of work. Like cracked walls, stained with tar. The still saying that this is how it was before, is how it is now. Like, why would it? It brings to mind the question of why would it be any different? It brings to mind the question, this could be different, you know? So I like the idea of still. I think in general with adverbs, it's always tricky with adverbs. Uh, there's always people advocating for cutting them. In general, I'm of that stance unless you can really kind of earn it, but I'm okay with still here. Cracked walls, still stained with tar. I liked also just the images of things that have already happened to this wall. It's already been covered with tar. It's already been stained, and it's already been cracked. The tar has the sense of being the more temporary thing than the cracking. The cracking feels in some ways more permanent, and I think that's because of the still stained with. We'll talk more about some of those things, but moving on, traps you set lurking. I like this idea of traps. The traps lurking. Trap. This is another one of those ironies. To me, trap is something that you set down. It's not supposed to move. It's supposed to kind of stay in place in general when I think of traps. And then when the moment is right, and the place is right, then it acts. But what is this trap doing? No, these traps are lurking. It's also interesting with the punctuation here because essentially happened as with the period, right? Because a lot of periods throughout the poem. I mean, you could talk about some kind of syntactic irony going on as well. We have these lines that are not complete sentences being ended with uh, periods, which is adding that sense of finality and adding that grammatical layer of complexity that would suggest that, oh, like this is a finished idea, this is a complete idea, but no, it's not actually complete. So then you're kind of into this about like, is this a complete idea or is this not? I think that's another thing that the syntax is kind of lending to it by using periods at the end. And also having, with that same idea, having most of your lines being really end stopped. You know, the basket reeks of rotting apples, that's a complete idea. Gladiolus slump in a vase, that's a complete idea. These rooms just like you left them, that's a in that case we get a comma, but in some ways it's still a very kind of, compared to all the other lines, is about as complete of an idea as the others. Cracked wall still stained with tar. Traps you set lurking. Soulless absent. And then the last three lines working together without any punctuation until here at the end with the period. So I thought that was interesting to go through as well. The traps I mentioned again, just kind of the motion of the traps versus what's actually happening here. They were set lurking. It's kind of terrifying, the idea of like a trap kind of wandering through your house trying to get you. Soulless, absent, silent storms. That's one of your probably your more direct kind of ironic statements, almost oxymoronic, silent, but then a storm. And then the next line, really great. We get still again. A still rage. I also find that there's a lot of these images of movement, like the rage, like something building, the anger building, compared to the storm also with its movement. And then you get this word still, which is once more doing a lot of work, still in the sense of constant, but then still also in the sense of frozen. So I really like that the irony of the word still there, because you have this sense of motionlessness that comes with still in in this moment of motion and lots of it. So I think still's doing a lot of work there. Still rage here in this place. Um, and then also here being the physical place that the speaker is describing, but also here inside of this poem, inside of this word, inside of this single line at the end of the nonet. So that again here I think is doing a lot of work as well. So just lots of little devices that I think this poem that, you know, nonets are tricky because it's not a lot of space to work with, but I do think there's lots of little layers of complexity that being added here that I think really work in its favor. The tension between the speaker and the you, the abandonment. We see abandonment consistently, right? We see it again in the missing in the apples, not taken care of. They were just left to rot. Okay, they weren't taken over before they started rotting. Um, the gladiolas that are slumping, the walls that are stained, that are cracked, that are tar again. Um, the traps you set lurking is if anything gets attention from the U, that seems to be the thing. What does the U pay attention to? Doesn't pay attention to the speaker much. Doesn't pay attention to the apples, but it does pay attention to the traps, which is again working with so the U pays attention to traps. It sets the traps lurking, but the solus goes absent. So it's interesting that what are the traps even sent for? It's also that's another kind of layer of irony too, is that you're setting the trap. When you think of trap, you think of security. You think of something bringing you solace, and yet we're not getting it, right? Because the solace itself is absent. And then we get the silent storms still rage here. Kind of makes you wonder if that's in relation to the speaker feeling those things. The silent storms still rage here. A description of the speaker, perhaps. Those are the things that jumped out to me in this quick analysis. This is, again, with fine print. These aren't necessarily poems that we've had hours and hours to kind of break down and analyze. A lot of these are kind of first reactions and things. We're trying to give the person who wrote the poem an idea of what would a relatively initial reaction to a piece be, and how would we look at analyze it. But I like the complexity here. I think it's using irony as a poetic device and tool very effectively. But let me know your thoughts. Do you see irony in other places? Do you not see irony in the places I identified? It'd be great to know that. And once more, I encourage you check out diversuspoetry.com/residency if you're a women poet. We're looking for 2. There's still time to send in applications through October 31st, 11:59 midnight. You also see opportunities to have some free talks with us so we can discuss ways to turn your poetry into a video, into a course, into an event, anything like that online, including maybe you even want to just host a webinar. You want to host a webinar for like 100 people. Okay, cool. We can do that. We can make that happen for you. Just let us know and let us talk. Once more, my name is Jeff. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of your time on a Sunday. If you're watching live with me, greatly appreciate that. I'll see you guys later. Have a good day. Have a good night. Have a good afternoon. And take care.